Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Joel, and thanks for being here today. We're going to talk a little bit about doing lines, and before the Facebook censors get a hold of me, not those kinds of lines. We're going to talk about lines of gear as the military uses the term, and then how we can relate that over kind of into civilian life. Because there's always, when you're taking a purely military concept and moving it over to the civilian side, you always kind of have to modify it because it's obviously very different missions. So if you try to apply a lot of military terms and ideas directly over to civilian life, it just doesn't translate very well. So some of you guys may have heard people talking about, hey, that's on my line 1 gear. Oh, don't put that there. You need to have that in your line 2 gear. It needs to be in your line 3 gear. So what does all that mean? And does it even apply to you? And if it does apply, how? So the line system is basically a way of ranking gear according to your need. Line 1 is basically the stuff you want to have on you at all times. It's the stuff that allows you to defend yourself, possibly do some basic medical, do some communication. Depending on where you're at, it may be where you need your escape and evasion kit. So that's your line 1 gear. Your line 2 gear is a little bit of heavier stuff. It's kind of your combat load. And then your line 3 gear is typically like a sustainment style load. So a backpack for 24 to 48 hours, even 72, depending on what your needs are. In the military, when they usually say line 1 gear, they're usually talking about belt gear, like what I have here. So this would be, what they might call line 1 gear. So got my pistol so I can defend myself. If I have my rifle, I do have 1 magazine, and I've got an IFAK and a tourniquet. So, I could throw a radio on here and I can shoot, communicate, and I can also take care of medical needs for myself. In the civilian world, I'm not typically walking around with all that gear on. So I tend to look at, in the civilian world, line 1 gear is almost more like your everyday carry. A lot of the same gear goes into it, but obviously I'm not walking around overt for most of us. Some of us can. I can't. You get really weird looks when you walk around wearing that here. But I can carry my pistol. I can carry a flashlight. I can carry a knife, my cell phone, and even a pocket or an ankle IFAK. Those are all things that I can carry, and they're all things that I'd like to have on me. I do know individuals that also will add an escape and evasion kit, some small survival stuff. It really depends on what your setup is and what your needs are. In the military, I'm wearing this belt. Of course, in the military, I'm also usually not riding around, in yoga pants and a minivan with 3 kids in the back. To be fair, I'm not usually doing that in the civilian world either, but some of us are. So I tend to move a battle belt like this one for a civilian into kind of line 2. Line 1 is that immediate stuff I always have on me. That's my everyday carry. Line 2 is more of a, hey, things are getting bad. Maybe there's a natural disaster or some other thing where it's not as important for me to carry concealed, but it is still important for me to have the gear on me and have it a little more accessible. Because obviously when you're concealing stuff, it's just a little bit less accessible. It's a little slower to get to. And there are limits on what you can carry because, I'm only so big. I can only put so much stuff stuffed into my ankles and waist and everywhere else before I start to look even bulkier than I do normally. So I tend to move battle belts into like a line 2, call it line 2 belt if you want. So I tend to do that for civilians. You move it into the line 2. Now for the military, your line 2 is typically your heavier combat rig. So a chest rig, your plate carrier and helmet. And I think for a civilian that remains in line 2, you're just going to have to kind of work out in your mind how you want to differentiate, the lower level of line 2 from the higher level of line 2. Because even, in a disaster scenario where maybe you want to carry that belt and the gear that's on it fairly frequently, you may not always want to have, your chest rig or your body armor on you all the time, because that gets heavy, and you wear that for a while, especially when you're trying to wear it 24/7. It's going to wear you down, and it's not practical. So you still need to be able to move back and forth between the levels of gear. And the really important thing is that you've got to analyze this for yourself. Like, especially if you have a group of friends and, you'd say you're a neighborhood watch group or whatever, and you're worried about a natural disaster scenario. Get together with your friends and work it out, saying, hey, this is how we're going to do line 1, line 2, line 3. So if we have to work out some sort of watch rotation for looters, the guy that's on watch is going to be on line 2. The guy that is, the backup is in line 1, and then the guys that are sleeping, if you want to sleep in line 1, knock yourselves out. That's not going to be comfortable, but hey, whatever, pull it off. And then line 3 is your sustainment stuff. So line 3 is assuming that you are going out away from whatever your base is, whether that's, a bivouac area, whether it's your house, whatever. But it's assuming that you're going out away from your base, and you got to have to sustain yourself in the field. So that's going to be, food, water, comfort items if you need them. I know there's two really competing schools of thoughts on comfort items. You got the guys who are going to exist off of whatever straw pallet they can find, and then you got the guys that are going to bring their air mattress. I tend not to go to either of those extremes. I believe that there are some comfort items that really help with your morale and can keep you going longer, and they're worth the wait. But when you start to get into that sustainment gear, it's kind of like the preppers with the go bags and the bug outs and all that stuff. You got to carry that, so you can pack it with whatever you want. Once you pack it with whatever you want, I really recommend you actually put it on and try walking around with it, because that walking around is going to tell you really quick whether or not what you have in that bag is a good idea. If you start walking around and realize you feel like your shoulder's going to fall off after about 5 minutes, two things. One, walk around more, because you'll get used to it. And two, go back in the bag, evaluate what's in the bag, and make sure you actually want it in the bag. Load it with essential stuff first. Food, water, or a way to get food and water. And backup stuff. Half the stuff on this belt, I've got a light on my gun, I've got a secondary flashlight. If I'm carrying communications gear, whether it's a radio or a cell phone, I have to be able to replace the batteries and all that stuff, or charge it. So that's essential stuff so that I can shoot, move, and communicate. Everything else after that becomes do I need this? How is this enhancing my mission? And if it enhances my mission enough, then yeah, I throw it in there. So quick review, because I tend to ramble. For the civilian, I would say your line 1 gear is your everyday carry gear. But the important thing is not the specific items in that list. The important thing to remember is that your line 1 gear is the stuff that is on you at all, or at least the vast majority of the time, that allows you to defend yourself, do some minor medical, and communicate, and possibly escape. Like my car keys, it's going to possibly help me escape. So that's the critical stuff you want to have on you at all times. Your line 2 is the heavier gear. When we've moved past defending ourselves with just our pistol and 1 magazine, maybe things are getting a little more serious. It's typically divided up into your battle belt, with the gear on your battle belt, which is the stuff you want the immediate access to, and then the stuff that is on your chest rig, plate carrier, whatever, which is the stuff that's going to help you out in a more sustained engagement, but that you maybe don't want to carry with you all the time. And that's going to vary depending on your mission, whether it's a quick walk around and scout, or whether it's a, I might get in a serious sustained fight of some sort. And then you got your line 3, which is your sustainment gear. It's stuff that's going to keep you alive for 24, 48, 72 hours away from whatever your base camp is. So that was a really quick overview, and I hope that was kind of a useful overview that helps you, establish some guidelines as far as, how am I going to organize my gear? What gear am I going to take? What gear am I going to keep? What gear am I going to leave behind? Gear is an interesting world. It's a lot of fun to play with. It's a lot of fun to buy. It's a lot of fun to sell. It's a lot of fun to set up and use. And you can spend a lot of money building up this perfect kit, but if you never test it and use it, it's not going to be perfect. And you've always got to remember when you're dealing with gear, why am I buying this gear? What is this gear going to do for me that, the gear I already have doesn't? Or what is this gear going to do for me that justifies paying whatever the price is for that gear? Sometimes it's just cool and I want it. Fine. I'm actually good with that. I've bought a lot of gear for that reason. But if you're serious about preparing for whatever the scenario is, buy the stuff that enhances your capability first, and then after that you can go out and buy the stuff that just looks cool and maybe enhances your capability too. But hope this has been useful for you. Thanks for tuning in. If this was useful, if you could hit the like, the subscribe, the notifications button, so you know when we're putting out more videos. If you would like to support what we do, because hey, all this stuff's not free, we do have a Patreon page that you can join up and support what we do here. And thanks for watching. The next few videos that I plan on doing are going to be about gear. Some of the gear that I use, whether for law enforcement or for the military, or even for some of the teaching that I did. So thanks for watching. I hope to see you guys next time.